Welcome to this week's show of Millennial Money, the show where we talk about everything that is relevant to millennials. Now, before we start this show, I just want to mention that next week on April the 3rd, that I'm doing a live event in central London where I'll be talking on a panel discussion about buying property, the sort of new way of doing it, and also talking about I'm on a panel with various other people who run fintech firms. So there is Nested, there's Habito, the mortgage provider, and there's Moneybox, which is the app which saves your change when you spend money and actually invests it for you. So we're going to be talking about buying property, we're going to talk about everything from investing. So make sure you come along, it's free. Check out our social media channels where you can find out everything you need to know about the event. And I'd love to see as many of you as possible. Lauren is going to be there, Andy will be there, and Justin will be there. But anyway, we'll get on with the show.
So before we start, I just want to say a very big thank you to all of those of you who emailed in with your questions for the Millennial Money videos. So this week we're actually going to cover a few of those questions. The first one, someone asked, Damien, how they go about curbing their spending habits.
I always remember seeing this idea of leaving your wallet at home. That used to be one. And that doesn't actually work anymore.
That's not very practical.
No, it's not very practical. But also in the world of technology, you can use an Apple Watch to spend money. So we've got contactless payments via anything to do with like phones. So that doesn't work anymore. I mean, the one thing I would say is if it's something you want to buy and you really want to, then defer buying it for 48 hours. And the reason that 48-hour period is it's meant to stop impulse buys. So if you want something, you see it, you like it, then hold off for 48 hours. If you still want it, you still like it, you're still desperate for this thing, then knock yourself out and buy it. But by waiting 48 hours, you hopefully will curb any of that impulse buying. Because don't forget, the world is rigged. So we go into shops are rigged. So there's lots of psychology in the way shops are laid out. So we are manipulated to buy things that we don't want. All the marketing that we get, we're manipulated to want things that we don't really need. So you've got to try and battle that by waiting.
Yeah, and definitely I think another thing about impulse buying is never ever go into a supermarket or a shop to buy your lunch when you're starving because you end up buying double of what you actually want. Well, I do anyway. I always buy the crisps, Pringles, biscuits, chocolate, cake, and then I don't end up even eating it. But I was hungry at the time.
It's brilliant working with Lauren because Lauren she fills the office full of things and like broken biscuits or whatever they are. So yeah, so in that respect, I quite like your impulse buying, Lauren. So what's the next question?
So the next question was someone wanted to know whether it was best to prioritise their pension or an ISA.
So the first thing I would say is if you're employed, make sure you join your employer's pension scheme via auto-enrolment. Now, what that is, if you're employed, your employer has to offer you a scheme of auto-enrolment whereby if you join, then from April, the amount is you're going to have to pay 5% of your wages into it, but they will have to pay in 3%. So that means that you get an 8% pension contribution each year. So the employer's contribution is effectively free money. Now, they can't encourage you to opt out to save themselves money. If they do, they're breaking the law. So that's the first thing I would say is auto-enroll. In terms of pension versus ISA, it's an interesting question. It's about flexibility. So if you want to pay in even more money into your pension, the good thing about that, if you're saving for retirement, is you get a kicker. So you get tax relief at your marginal rate, which means that if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you get 20% of that, what would be tax, you'd get it added on. So if you paid in £80, you'd actually be rounded up to £100 by the government and the taxman giving that tax relief. So that's positive because your pot is already big or bigger when you've put money in, and it'll keep growing over time. The only downside is you can't access that till 55. So you've got to weigh up, do you need that money? And ISA, on the other hand, is very flexible. You can take money out of it, you can put money into it within the certain rules, but you don't get tax relief on the way in. But on the plus side, you get tax relief, well, not tax relief, but it's tax-free on the way out. So if you take money out, you don't get taxed. Whereas a pension, you take money out, when you're 55 and you're going to retire, then you have to pay tax on that. So it's about flexibility. Personally, I quite like ISAs because it means that if my boiler blows up, I can then get that hold of that money and use that if I need to.
And also another one on that actually is we've recently just written an article on a lifetime ISA, which is an interesting concept because you can actually pay into this ISA ready for retirement. So it's another alternative to the pension, but this particular ISA is actually designed to plan ahead for your retirement. So if you wanted to know more about that, then we have an article on our website about lifetime ISAs.
Yeah, and the aim of that product was you could use the money to buy a house or save for a pension. It was a concept that was meant to be flexible. So go and have a look at that because it will be relevant to a lot of you.
And finally, just to finish, we had another question about the best way to budget and how someone goes about budgeting their money, how we used to do it before, and what's the best way for them to do it going forward.
See, the old way of doing it, I used to say open up as many bank accounts as you can because of free banking, and then you use when your money was paid into your bank from your employer, you then move money into different bank accounts that were assigned for different things like your food bills or your mortgage or whatever it was, and the direct debits come out of those ones accordingly. But of course now with the budgeting, there are a whole wealth of apps out there, and I know you've been looking at quite a few of them, but a whole load of apps out there that can be used to make budgeting easier. You don't even have to try. It starts telling you how you're spending money, where you could save, wasteful subscriptions. So, I mean, I know Starling Bank is one of the ones out there that is a new bank. It's what they call an app-only bank that does a lot of this for you. So they'll actually allow you to sort of silo off money for savings, and they'll allow you to sort of help you build a cash buffer by every time you use your card, any sort of rounding up the pence, the extra bit can be put into a savings account. If you want to find out more, look at our Starling review. But I mean, I know Lauren's been looking at quite a few others.
Yeah, so Monzo, another great app-only bank. Emma is a really good budgeting app which helps pinpoint the subscriptions that you're paying for that you didn't realise that you're still paying for. Like a good example is maybe if you're paying for Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music, but actually you're only listening to it on one, then you're wasting a bit of money there. And it just kind of highlights that for you, which is a really good way of making you realise, because we don't always have time to check through our bank accounts and what's coming out monthly. Also, there's a couple of apps, You Need a Budget or Squirrel. They're really good for actually showing you how to budget. The only thing is you do have to pay for them, but I personally probably wouldn't pay for it because it's quite simple when it gets down to it. If you can manage it yourself, it will save you a bit of money. It's almost quite ironic that they ask you to pay for something on managing your budget.
Yeah, paying money to save is always going to be a difficult sell. I mean, we have to keep it brief on these videos because it's Instagram, it's social media, but all of these things we talk about, there are articles like pensions versus ISA. I go into more detail on Money to the Masses. There's Lauren's reviews of the various apps, so go and check them out. And if there is an app that you like the look of and you want to find out more what Lauren thinks or what we think, then please write in to lauren@moneytothemasses.com and she'll look at it and do a full review.
Yeah, so to finish, as ever, as we said last week, please, any questions, anything you want to know, email lauren@moneytothemasses.com and visit our social media, so our Instagram @moneytothemasses, our Twitter @money2themasses, and our Facebook Money to the Masses.